Twitter is one of the 3 most popular social media sites. Of course, many people refer to it as the public forum or marketplace of ideas, and yet since they've changed hands to Daddy Musk, the UI has remained relatively stagnant. Now, there's not really much wrong with the UI here. As you can see here, fundamentally everything that you need to do with the platform is relatively easy, but for the sake of pushing my design skills a little bit, we're just going to reskin Twitter to give it a different aesthetic while hopefully maintaining the simple user experience that they've got going for them. Here's the style guide as always, taking their lovely Twitter blue, some black hues from their site, and then we're just going to use Public Sans because it's a nice performant font that's not going to get in the way of reading posts. Legibility is quite nice. Let's get in there and see what we come up with, and hopefully we don't get sued by Elon before the end of the video. Initially, I really wanted to put the search control right in the middle at the top on the UI, because I felt like people would often search Twitter to find relevant topics that are either trending or in the news somewhere. But I eventually pivoted from this and put the navigation controls there instead, because it made more sense, and ultimately you want the navigation controls above the main content that you're controlling anyway. Almost every other app on the planet uses the upper right region of the screen to showcase the user's profile and let them know if they have any pending notifications. So that's really one of the only fundamental UX changes I made to the UI. We put the user menu back where it should be and moved the interactivity and social controls into that same container. Now, of course, Twitter has just released their new AI tool, Grok, and for anyone that's had a chance to play around with it, when you're asking a question of Grok, it kind of replaces the entire Twitter feed wholesale. So instead of having it in the sidebar, it kind of made sense for it to be an additional context switch on the feed itself. So I'm adding Grok in as an option to select here and putting a little beta tag on there to indicate that it's a very new feature. Now we're getting into the meat and potatoes here, and we're redesigning the postcards that appear in the feed itself. Now, not much is being changed here. Like I said, they really get most of the important things right. But what I am changing is just making sure that everything's a lot more aligned, and then of course bumping up the font and line height just a little bit so that people with pretty bad eyes like myself can read the text without having to strain too much. Another small, barely noticeable change here is moving all of the controls to the left side so that it's very easy to click on the various different actions instead of having to scroll your mouse basically 1 inch on the screen from one to the other. I feel like this also makes things look a little neat, and if we wanted to put a little menu off to the right, we could do that and it wouldn't look cluttered. One of the biggest issues that I felt existed with the existing UI was really that it just felt a little too cluttered. I mean, clearly this is a mobile-first UI, and they've designed for, let's say, a big tablet, and that big tablet would just, be the same UI that shows up on desktop. But this leads to the sidebars both kind of encroaching on the main feed, and I really wanted to push those sidebars off to the right to give the content the space it deserves. That's the main focal point of the UI, and users should be able to read through that without the distractions of the sidebar, and then only engage with the secondary content if they want to. I really like the idea of encouraging users to follow others that might be interested in the same things as them or sharing similar ideas. I feel like this is a solid feature that exists in the current UI, and I'm just porting that over to the new UI in the fancy sidebar. Like I said, there's most of the fundamentals of the Twitter UI are totally fine. We're just kind of adding a little layer of polish on them here. It took me an absurdly long time to come up with the appropriate treatment for the Show New Posts button, and we end up actually settling on a similar UI to the one that exists today, but it just goes to show you, sometimes when designers design things, they design them in a certain way for a reason, and changing them is something you should do at your own peril. And I really like the UX of being able to just start typing a post from your homepage whenever you want. Instead of having to click a button to explicitly say that you want to enter the posting context, you just have a text box there that allows you to start typing. So we're going to persist that part of the UI into this new UI, but we're going to simplify things a little bit, tidy up the alignment a little bit more, and then of course change the way that it appears on the page so it doesn't take up too much vertical space. And finally, in a somewhat desperate attempt to do something different from the existing UI, I'm playing around with putting the user's profile somewhere on this page. Now, as you're looking at this, you're probably thinking, wow, what a terrible idea. And I want to underscore that at the time, I thought I was doing something just interesting and novel, but as I got further into the redesign, I realized that I was violating a pretty core principle of UX design, in that I was splitting the user's attention in two places. So by putting both of these items, the profile and the feed, in the main container here, and especially having the profile image be quite large and the name be quite large, I'm kind of signaling to the user that they should pay attention here. But we really want them to pay attention to the body, the scrolling list of posts. So I end up removing this and putting it in the sidebar instead. That way we get the benefit of having a persistent profile section that users can use to track their follower count and create new posts, but without the drawback of splitting the user's attention and potentially getting them to disengage from the app. Alright, there we go. I think this is a very clean and simple Twitter that still does everything you want to do, but has an interesting, unique aesthetic to it. Of course, we've got the primary navigation moved into the middle, and we've moved Grok into that same space. All of the user controls are where you'd expect them to be. The navigation controls are in their own space, and you can just scroll through the feed much like you can on the existing UI. I think the only meaningful changes here are that I've moved the profile into a persistent space over here. The sidebar is kind of just like a persistent thing that sits here, and the content itself has more room to breathe. But like I said at the start, the Twitter UI is really fine. Like, there's no fundamental usability issues. I would say perhaps the only major UX flaw with Twitter is that the buttons here aren't really self-explanatory, but that's largely resolved by simply using Twitter for a little bit. But let me know what you think. Was this a hit or a miss? And I hope you guys have a lovely holiday season. I'll be taking a couple of weeks off. Take care.